Good evening, and welcome back to this evening's edition of the Fundamentals of War. If you're new here at this channel, The Fundamentals of War, we go in depth about specific battles, campaigns, and conquests throughout history. It's very important to understand the causes, what led into it, how the battle was fought, and overall what was the aftermath. Today, we are going into in depth about the English Armada. The English Armada took place in 1589, and it was between England of Queen Elizabeth and Spain under Philip II. It was a very important battle, but it is often overshadowed by the previous year's battle between the two, better known as the Spanish Armada. Let's get into it. Here's a picture of the Spanish Armada, which comes from Britannica. To set the stage, it's very important to understand what predated the Battle of the English Armada, and that was the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada was known as one of the biggest naval battles at the time. It was between Spain and England, which was headed by King Philip II of Spain, as well as Elizabeth I of England. It came from economic and religious reasons. First off, the Spaniards wanted to have the main trade systems to the Americas to be able to bring back treasures for economic reasons. Not only that, the Spaniards were Catholic, whereas the English were Protestant. Because of that, Philip II wanted to ultimately turn England into a Catholic nation. Not only that, the English ships began to start attacking the Spanish treasure ships, which King Philip did not like. Because of that, the Spanish Armada, which was the naval fleet of Spain, decided to head north and go attack England. Once they headed up, they realized that they were in trouble. Although that they had bigger warships, the English had ships that were much smaller, more maneuverable, and had a longer artillery range. Because of that, the English were able to incorporate maneuver warfare and run around the Spanish ships. Also, they began setting ships on fire and sending them towards the Spanish ships to ultimately break their formation. Due to that, the English were ultimately able to scrape out a victory, which was extremely important to them at this time. Although that was the case, they began to get very greedy. Now that the Battle of the Spanish Armada was won by the English, it is important to understand the steps they took to raise the counterattack. When looking at the English Armada, they first needed the funds to launch an attack on the Spaniards. This source, coming from Web Hispana, has a quote that goes in depth about it. It says, "The English Armada was financed as an investment in the stock market. That is, Queen Elizabeth paid 1/4 and the Dutch, allies of the English, 1/8. The Portuguese aspiring king, Antonio de Crato, also invested money in the Portuguese crown jewels that he had stolen." Thus, in April 1589, the expedition set sail with almost 150 ships, including 6 galleons and 25,000 men. Now it's important to understand the expedition. The expedition was led by Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Norreys, and they were the two joint commanders. They had 3 primary objectives. First and foremost, it was to destroy the remaining ships of the Spanish Armada. They believed that while they are under repair, they will be vulnerable at the port, which would give them a very easy opportunity to destroy the rest of the Spanish Navy. Not only that, they wanted to seize their treasure fleet, which had a ton of gold and silver from the New World to Spain. This would bring in a big economic boost to England. Not only that, they wanted to install the new King of Portugal, which would then help them have new diplomatic relations, as well as bring a very good alliance between England and Portugal. Setting the stage for the fight, the English were already at a disadvantage. They had very little experience in organizing large naval campaigns, which led to them having bad logistics. Not only that, it was stated that nearly 2,000 soldiers had left before they even saw the Spanish coast for a variety of reasons, whether they were scared or just didn't feel like it was a worthy battle. Not only that, there were only about 1,800 veteran soldiers compared to roughly 22,000 untrained volunteers. Because of that, they did not have the siege weapons essential to take fortresses, as well as the cavalry needed to prepare ground attacks. Also, there was another very decisive moment in the war. Sir Francis Drake was ordered to attack Santander, which was one of the naval ports, but he believed that there was unfavorable winds and did not want to be surrounded by the current Spanish fleet, so he decided to head to the garrison city of La Corona. The reason that led him to make the decision still isn't necessarily clear, but he decided to take that route instead. Once getting there, they were instantly faced with a lot of problems. First off, the logistics were just extremely poor, and they did not bring enough food nor expect the resistance that they were met with. They heavily underestimated the strength of the Spanish defenses, and because of that, the siege extended for a lot longer than the English anticipated. It was costly in terms of time and resources. One of the main deterrents of the Englishmen was the legend of Maria Pita. It was stated that when the English second lieutenant was rallying his troops at the foot of the walls, she went over him, found a pike from a flag, and stabbed him, which ultimately caused the final collapse of the morale of most of the attackers. Because of that, nearly 12,000 men decided to retreat instead of continuing on with their battle. After failing at Corunna, the English headed to Lisbon. They believed that there would be a local uprising in favor of the new Portuguese king, yet they were extremely wrong. No revolt ever came about, and the Spanish and Portuguese defenders were well prepared once again, and ultimately the English found themselves unable to break through. To conclude, the aftermath of the war was devastating for the English. They lost nearly 15,000 men during the conquest, which was roughly 60% of their navy. It happened due to not having enough food and everything else that goes along with it, as well as disease ran rampant throughout their ranks. Not only that, the strategic consequences were devastating. It continued the Anglo-Spanish War until 1604, and it showed that England had a very, very big problem with logistic issues. Also, the economic implications were devastating, and it took years for England to be able to come out of that hole. As a whole, this war was highlighted by just overall poor logistics and the fact that the English were overconfident and did not do any planning going into this. Thank you.